so today we're going to get into what has already in the past been probably the most popular teaching that I've done. I don't know if that's popular because it's controversial or it's popular just because it's popular, but it's called Beware False Prophets. And this is the only end time teaching that I do generally. Okay, so when people ask me about end time events and the Messiah, the anti-Messiah, the return and all that stuff, this is the teaching. So this is the one and only. But because we never videotaped it before, I wanted to get this on videotape for you guys. All right? So I want to start off by defining what a prophet is. Now this teaching, like a lot of the teachings that I have that you can access, they all come out of Torah portions. So when I was doing the yearly cycle of the Torah portions and got to Deuteronomy 13, when it talks about beware false prophets, this is the teaching that came out of that, the Ruach's leading in that teaching from about 2000. Okay, so this is a long time ago. And I redid it a couple years ago, but it was never on video, so now we're going to do it here. We started in Numbers chapter 11. I want to define what a prophet is. Okay, I want you to define what a prophet is. Now, this is not going to be about all the teachers running around necessarily. This is going to be ultimately about end times anti-messiahs. Okay? So this is actually going to really get into it. And hold your hats. You're going to hear some stuff that's going to just blow your hats off, so we'll see. Okay, Numbers, he's already knows, so he's laughing. Numbers chapter 11 and verse 14. Numbers 11 and verse 14. Bimidbar. If I say the Hebrew name of the chapter of the book, I will also say the English. Hopefully that will help for everybody. Bimidbar, Numbers chapter 11 and verse 14. It says here, I am unable to bear all these people alone. This is Moshe speaking, because the burden is too heavy for me. And if you are doing this to me, please slay me altogether if I found favor in your eyes, and let me not see my evil. So basically Moses was being driven crazy by 2 or 3 million people, and he said, I'm going to kill them, so please kill me first. All the pastors, rabbis start laughing at that point. Amen, brother. I've said that same prayer. Okay. So then Yahweh said to Moshe, gather me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people and officers over them, and bring them to the tent of meeting, and let them stand there with you, and I shall come down and speak with you there, and shall take the spirit that is on you. So now there was a spirit on Moshe. Moshe had the Ruach. Don't tell the churches that. They'll just not, you know. The spirit did exist before Acts chapter 2, okay? Amen. And people did have it. Yes. Okay, so Moshe had a spirit on him, and he said, go gather me the 70 elders and bring them to the tent of meeting, and I'm going to take the spirit that is on you and put it on them. And they shall bear the burden of the people with you, so that you do not bear it yourself alone. Okay, so what was the purpose of this spirit? To help him bear the burdens of the people so he didn't have to bear it alone. Okay. And say to the people, set yourselves apart, for tomorrow you shall eat meat, because you have wept in the hearing of Yahweh, saying, who is going to give us meat to eat? For it is well with us in Mitzrayim, and Yahweh shall give you meat, and you shall eat. Of course, this is the absurdity of how we all sound like, oh, I was fine. I didn't need to go through all this. Because it says, oh, we were great in Mitzrayim. Yes. It says that every labor they did was with bitterness, and it was bitter, harsh labor, but they had leeks. You read that verse, right? Oh, the leeks. We had leeks. I never thought of that as like the major delicacy that's going to get me excited. But the leeks, I don't know. Big deal for them. Okay. He says, and you are going to eat, and not 1 day, nor 2 days, or 5 days, or 10 days, or 20 days, but a month of days until it comes out of your nose, and becomes an abomination to you. He says, you want meat? I'll give you meat until it's coming out of your nose. Yeah. It's almost like a parent says to a kid, right? Oh, I'll give you meat. Because you have rejected Yahweh who is among you, and have wept before him, saying, why did we come up out of Mitzrayim? And Moshe said, the people in whose midst I am are 600,000 men on foot, and you have said, I give them meat to eat for a month of days? So now he's not understanding all this. He said, could flocks and herds be slaughtered for them to be sufficient for them? Or could all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them to be sufficient for them? Because there's a huge amount of people. Not to mention the women and children, right? So you got about 3 million people there. And then Yahweh says, look, is the arm of Yahweh too short? Now see whether my word meets you or not. Moshe went out and spoke to the people the words of Yahweh, and he gathered the 70 men of elders of the people and placed them around the tent. And Yahweh came down in the cloud and spoke to him, and took of the spirit that was on him and placed the same upon the 70 elders. And it came to be, when the Spirit rested upon them, that they prophesied, but did not continue. but they prophesied. However, 2 men had remained in the camp. The name of one was Eldad, and the other name of the one was Medad. And the Spirit rested upon them. So they didn't even have to be there. They just happened to be part of the 70, and they were in the camp. He says, and they were going among those listed. They were among those listed, but they did not go out to the tent, and they prophesied in the camp. So we don't know what this prophesying thing is yet. He says, and a young man ran and informed Moshe and said, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. And Yehoshua, Joshua son of Nun, Moshe's assistant from his youth, answered and said, Moshe, my master, forbid them. Interesting. Why is he doing that? And Moshe said to him, are you jealous for my sake? Oh, that all the people of Yahweh were prophets, that Yahweh would put his Spirit upon them. So let's understand what this is talking about. Okay, what this is talking about. It says, oh, he wants them all to be prophets. Prophecy is not speaking the future, although occasionally prophets do. But that's not what makes you a prophet. But you know, people who say that they're going to prophesy over you are going to say, you're going to get married, you're going to be a teacher, you're going to do this, they're like soothsayers. They're like seers that are of the mystics. That's what they're doing, magic. I'm going to do a teaching one day called, Do You Believe in Magic? Because I think Christians and Messianics all walk around not knowing it, but they act like they believe in magic.
Thank you.
Okay? Do you believe in magic? Okay, but they do. Okay, they do. Just like, for example, the sacred namers. I say Yahweh. I'm not a sacred namer. Sacred namers are like, if you don't say it exactly this right way and do it, because they think if you do, magic is going to happen. It's like an incantation or a magic word.
Yeah.
There's no magic in saying the name right. We're just trying to be respectful to say his name in the best way we know how. Hopefully that makes some sense. But yet there are those that say, oh no, if you say the name just right and all this other, then all these wonderful things are going to happen. That's magic. We don't believe in magic. That's not what's happening here. Right. What was going on at the beginning? I read all of that extra stuff about the meat and everything else because Moses was frustrated, needed help, or he was going to kill somebody basically. And he wanted help taking up the burden of the people. So what was Moses already doing in handling this burden? He was counseling, teaching Torah, advising, judging, handling issues, right? So these prophets were those who are able to do inspired speaking.
Yes.
In other words, they were speaking the word of Yahweh with authority, just like Moshe had been doing. Now, this had been unique to Moshe up to this point, so Joshua got jealous. He wouldn't be jealous if they were doing something different. He got jealous because they were doing something only Moses up to this point had been doing. So let's understand that what a prophet is somebody that speaks with authority the word of Yahweh. That's your definition. It's inspired speech, but specifically, you know, when Yeshua spoke, there's one verse in one of the Gospels where it says, the people were amazed because he spoke as one with authority. In other words, he was speaking like a prophet or higher, not like an average guy standing around screaming, you know, the message of repentance or whatever. He had some authority. He had a different anointing that people received when he spoke. So did Moshe. So did the 70 after this point, because they were given that same anointing by having the Spirit passed on to them. So let's understand that a prophet or one who prophesies is one who speaks forth for someone, in this case Yahweh. It is different than the word for seer, and according to the sages and commentaries, has nothing to do with predicting the future. A prophet is one who is given power to instruct and admonish the people with an authority that is recognized as having its source in Yahweh. Hopefully that's clear now, the definition of a prophet. Deuteronomy now, chapter 18. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 18.
Would Rabbi Paul be considered a prophet?
Deuteronomy chapter 18. Now, we're videotaping and audio taping. We can't interrupt the teaching. All right, Deuteronomy 18 and in verse 18. Okay, Deuteronomy 18 and verse 18. I shall rise up for them a prophet like you out of the midst of their brothers, and I shall put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. There's your definition of prophet. Now here they're speaking about, I raise up to them a prophet. This is a very critically important prophet. But this is what all prophets do. So what he's talking about, by the way, in this verse, he's talking about Joshua, who they needed to listen to. He's talking about all the prophets from Samuel forward. Okay? He's talking about the prophets. He said, look, I'm going to put my words in their mouth. What happened with, remember Jeremiah? Jeremiah, open your lips, I'll put my words in your mouth. Okay? And it shall be the man who does not listen to my words, which he speaks in my name, I shall require it of him. This is not unique to Yeshua, by the way. Every prophet that spoke and people didn't listen, it was required it of them. He required it of them. He says, but the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other mighty ones, even that prophet shall die. Now let's understand a very important phrase. We're going to go back to our Christianese idea, right? When it talks about doing something in my name, we need to culturally revert ourselves back several thousand years to understand what that idiomatic phrase means. It simply means in my authority. It has nothing to do with the name itself. Again, we don't believe in magic. So if we do it in his name, in other words, you say it and go, in the name of Yeshua, ba-da, it's like magic. It's like the magic punchline, abracadabra. Okay? That's kind of what we think of. No. Anytime you see the word name in that kind of a phrase, in the name of, or in my name, or there's no other name, interchange that with authority. There's no other authority by which you must be saved. Oh, that makes a whole lot more sense than name. Because what if you don't have the name right? Then there's no other name and you got the wrong name. And by the way, not a one of them out there has the way to pronounce the name exactly right. As a matter of fact, in Revelation it says there's a name on the one coming, which we know is Yeshua, written on his thigh that nobody knows. Well, there you go. Everybody's got it wrong. Essentially. You see what I'm saying? So, but we in our haughtiness and our cockiness think that, hey, well, we know everything. And so, boy, do people beat up other people because, well, you have to say, Yahasha Husha Washa Washa. I don't know where they get all the extra syllables from. You've heard these.
Yeah.
Well, it's not Yahweh, it's Yahweh. Oh, it's not Yahweh, whatever, it's Yahuwah. Or it's not, listen, say it the best way you're confident, do the best you can, and try to be respectful. Don't overuse the name either. You'll hear me say Creator, Almighty, and all this other stuff. Don't overuse the name. The people only heard it once on Yom Kippur. They didn't get to hear the name every day. Okay? And when the benediction was blessing, the blessing was done, the Aaronic blessing, he said, this is how you shall put the name on the people. So that's when only the high priest was using the name. So don't get all carried away with the need to use the name. It's about the authority. Okay, let's understand it's about the authority. You know, there were two guys down in the Miami area where all those older Jewish guys were sitting around, and they found two guys on a bench, and they were fighting over this. Is it Yahweh, Yahweh, you know, what? How do you pronounce this thing? And so one of the guys said, well, only ask them. I mean, they're like 150 years old, and they're sitting on a bench. These Jewish guys probably know something. And they went over and they asked the guy, said, listen, we're having this little argument about the name. You know, is it Yahweh, Yahweh? The guy says, Yahweh. And the guy says, oh, thank you. He says, you're welcome. Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't resist. See, you got me all going from before. All right. So, look, it says, but the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I had not commanded him to speak, in my authority. In other words, the prophet's going, I'm claiming this on the authority of Yahweh. He said, and he said that he hadn't commanded him to speak it, or speaks in the name of another mighty one, even that prophet shall die. Verse 21. And when you say in your heart, how do we know the word which Yahweh has not spoken? He says, well, when the prophet speaks in the name of Yahweh, or the authority of Yahweh, and the word is not, it doesn't happen or comes not, that is the word which Yahweh had not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously. Don't be afraid of him. Okay, so we have that part of this. So that's laying a little foundation here about these prophets. Now understand, so this is the easy part. If they say it's going to happen and it doesn't happen, false prophet.
No.
False prophet, simple. But we're going to also see in Deuteronomy 13, there are going to be false prophets that they say it's going to happen and it does happen. Oh, that's more challenging. What do we do with that? So we're going to get to that in a minute. But and it's not in my notes, but I want us to go to Ezekiel 22 real quick. Because the verse triggered another verse. By the way, this is what the Ruach does. You want to know what the Ruach does? The Ruach is supposed to stir up to bring to remembrance. Can't bring to remembrance what you haven't put in. You can only remember something you knew.
Right.
So because I know Ezekiel 22, I'm reading this thing in Deuteronomy. It talks about when they say something that he had not commanded them to say, I can go to a verse that I know exists in Ezekiel 22 that talks about that. You understand? That's the Ruach bringing to remembrance. It wasn't in my notes. That's how the Ruach has to work with you. By the way, it only works if you put the food in, the verses in. If you fill the library up, then the Ruach has something to remind you about. Okay? And so that's what the Ruach does for you. Ezekiel 22 and in verse 25. We'll start there. There is a conspiracy of her prophets in her midst. These are people claiming to speak the word of Yahweh with authority. There's a conspiracy of people running around claiming her prophets, not Yahweh's prophets, the people's prophets. In her midst, like a roaring lion, tearing prey, they have devoured life, they have taken wealth and precious matters, they have made many widows in her midst. Just send your $1,000 seed and it'll all be good. Her priests have done violence to my teaching, and they profane my set-apart matters. Is there anything more violent you can do to the Torah than tell everybody it's been done away? I mean, it's like saying, tear it right out of the book. How could you do anything more violent to the teaching than say it's done away with? He says, they profane my set-apart matters, my kadosh matters. And so they take the stuff that is kadosh and they profane it. Like, I don't know, taking Passover and turning it into Easter. That's profaning a kadosh thing. He says, and they have not distinguished between the kadosh and the profane, the set apart and the profane. Nor have they made known the difference between the unclean and the clean, the tameh and the tahor. There's a teaching on the table called tameh and tahor. What state are you in? Everything in, especially the first 5 books, especially when you get to Leviticus forward, is about understanding the protocols of Tameh and Tahor, which have to do with interacting with the presence of the Almighty in the tabernacle. And so, you've never, I'm sure, heard anything about that in the church. But Tameh and Tahor is a very important statement, a very certain protocol that you need to understand. When you are Tameh, you're in a state of ritual uncleanness, and therefore you cannot come into the presence of Yahweh like in the tabernacle, in the Mishkan. That's why people would get zapped before going into that presence. This is why Nadab and Abihu got killed. Because they were bringing they weren't, it's not so much, it's a strange fire. It wasn't anything strange about the fire. It was unauthorized. There was no authorization for them to do what they did. Okay, their father had done it. Aaron and Moses had just taken fire in, but they were authorized to do it. Yahweh said, take your brazier, put the fire, bring it in. And then, this great spectacular Yahweh, burnt the offering and everything. Oh, that was authorized. They went in unauthorized, that's Tameh, they got killed. They weren't killed because they were drunk. Now, they may have done the stupidity because they were drunk, but that wasn't why they got killed. They got killed because they did something that was unauthorized. There are very specific rules of engagement with the Almighty's presence. Understand that. The Shekhinah is that high level of Abba's presence, of Yahweh's presence in the tabernacle. Okay? That's that high level of Yahweh's presence in the tabernacle. Now, how many of you have been in a church where they claim that the Shekinah glory fell in that church? Never happened. They say, how do you know? You weren't there. I said, because you're all alive. You're talking to me. They go, what are you talking about? Well, you see, there's this thing called Tameh and Tahor. And none of you were clean enough. By the way, none of us are either. Because there are certain rituals you'd have to go through before you could come into that presence, and we haven't done it. There's rules of engagement. So we have to understand, when I tell them, I know that didn't happen. Well, something happened. Well, I can't tell you what, but I'm sure something did happen. I can tell you what it wasn't, though. It was not the Shekhinah. Because you're all alive. You'd all be dead in your pork-eating, Sunday-keeping church without doing any rituals. Without the mikvah and the process and all the things necessary. It didn't happen. I'm sure you felt something happen, but it wasn't that. What did happen? I don't know. I wasn't there. I just know what couldn't have happened, because according to this book, you'd all be dead. Simple. Okay? Simple. Continuing, he says, and they've hidden their eyes from my Sabbaths. I'm not trying to have a hiss, and it's plural. My Sabbaths. Because there are the weekly Sabbaths. And then there's the 7 annual Sabbaths. Okay, so we need to learn those things. connected with the feast days, and I am profaned in their midst. Now listen to this. He says, her leaders in her midst are like wolves tearing the prey. We talked about wolves before we started this teaching. Okay, to shed blood, to destroy lives, to get greedy gain. Just send that money in, we'll send you an anointed towel. And people believe this stuff. He says, now listen, this is why I did all of this. This is the verse that was brought to my memory. Verse 28, and her prophets have coated them with whitewash, seeing a false vision and divining a lie for them, saying, thus said the Master Yahweh, when Yahweh had not spoken. Isn't that exactly what we just read about in Deuteronomy 18, right? Beware that false prophet that is going to say stuff when Yahweh hadn't said it. That's dangerous, dangerous stuff. And how many times did you hear these guys on TV? And you'll hear them today, because this is first day. You'll hear them today on the TV going, oh, the Lord told me to tell you. Really? Okay. Oh, I'm going to go way out on a limb. Somebody watching right now is suffering from back pain. What are you, like Einstein? That was amazing. 47 million people watching and somebody's suffering from back pain. Okay, somebody's having a marriage problem. Another Einstein moment. This is, and the people are like, oh, how did he know I was... Okay, back to Deuteronomy 13. Back to Deuteronomy 13. So remember I told you about some of my filters? Moshe's talking about it, and we just saw Ezekiel talking about it. The same thing. Okay? We have our two witnesses right there. Okay. Now, by the way, I didn't say strongly enough, but in Deuteronomy 18, it's obviously talking about Yeshua. But it's also, in a Hebraic understanding, talking about all the prophets. Okay? Greek mindset, Christian mindset is things happen once, and they're for one thing, and that's it. And so, by the way, according to that Christian mindset, that baby that's in Matthew chapter 1, that baby we call Yeshua, that baby would have nothing to do with Isaiah chapter 7. Because that baby was born for King Ahaz. So if you're going to be Greek, it ain't going to work. Because the prophecy was for Ahaz, to calm Ahaz down. And so you have Isaiah telling Ahaz, hey, calm down, ask for a sign. Ahaz says, I'm not going to ask for a sign because he was afraid these kingdoms are going to come and destroy him. He says, well, then Yahweh's going to give you a sign. This baby's going to be born 400 years from now. That's going to help Ahaz a lot. No, that baby was born, and actually you read in chapter 8 about the baby. He's there. Okay, Emmanuel is there. So, what does that have anything to do with what's happening in Matthew? Because one is a type and shadow of the other. You can only get there with layering of fulfillments. You can't get there linearly. You never heard that in church. I'm sure you never heard that in church. Nobody ever told you, by the way, that baby was born for Ahaz. Well, it had to be. Otherwise, Yahweh was a liar. Yahweh said, this is the sign I'm going to give you that these kingdoms are not going to come and crush you. So having a baby born a couple hundred years later is going to help Ahaz? How is that going to help anything for him? He's going to be dead. He says, this is going to be a sign to you that when you see him, his name is Emmanuel, God is with us, so that every time you look at him, you know you're going to be fine. So you have this layering of fulfillments. So this prophecy in Deuteronomy 18 was fulfilled by every prophet leading up to the prophet. Does that make sense? Okay. So I don't want to have any thought that anybody would say, oh, you diminished everything, you didn't mention Yeshua. Yes, it's ultimately pointing to Yeshua. Ultimately. Let's go to Deuteronomy 13. When there arises, we're going to be in verse 1. When there arises among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and he shall give you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or wonder shall come true. Different than what we just read in Deuteronomy 18, right? This time it's going to come true. And he says, and a sign or wonder comes true, of which he has spoken to you, saying, let us go after other mighty ones which you have not known and serve them. Okay, let me explain what that's saying. That's an idiomatic phrase. He's not saying literally that they would say that. What is the purpose of miracles or signs and wonders? What is the purpose of that? To strengthen your emunah, your faith, your belief, your trust in the Almighty. So this person is doing it to try to get you to strengthen your belief and trust in a different Almighty. So it's not so much saying, hey, I'm doing these signs and wonders, come worship Dagon. He's going to do it in a way that's going to lead you to another mighty one. And by the way, it doesn't have to be as obvious as Dagon. When they made the molded calf wasn't called, Menevis or something, or some other bull god. It was called Yahweh. They said, this is Yahweh that brought you out of Egypt. Yet it was a false Yahweh. It wasn't the real Yahweh. Yahweh's not a golden calf, a golden bull, whatever, right? So the same thing here. These prophets are still going to claim they're leading you to Yahweh, but it's not Yahweh. So now we're starting to get a little bit of the plot is thickening a little bit. He says, verse 3, he says, do not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams, for Yahweh your Elohim is trying you to know whether you love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and with all your being. So this is a test moment. You're being tested to see whether you will love Yahweh with all your heart, with all your being. He says, walk after Yahweh your Elohim and fear him and guard his commands and obey his voice, serve him and cling to him. We do have a teaching over there called cling, cleave, hold fast. It's an important one for you. All right. So he says, and that that prophet or dreamer that dreams is to be put to death because he has spoken apostasy against Yahweh, your Elohim, who brought you out of the lands of Egypt, etc. He says, thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. So this is considered evil. Let's understand from Scripture the definition of evil. Any breaking of any instruction from Yahweh is evil. We don't have a real good definition of evil as human beings in modern day times because we think evil is like, genocides, serial killers, child molesters. By the way, that's all evil. But that's our limited sort of thought. Evil has to be some extreme, horrible thing. According to Yahweh, breaking any instruction is evil. Okay? Evil. When he says things like, how long will this people continue in doing evil? The nation was not running around murdering, pillaging, and pedophiling. They were Sabbath breaking and doing idolatry. I mean, they were breaking much more, quote unquote, mundane sounding commandments. Okay, it wasn't what we normally think of as evil. Okay, evil we think Hitler. Yes. But we don't think Sabbath breaking. We don't think, eating the wrong foods. We don't think those things are evil. Well, according to Yahweh, any breaking of any instruction or any commandment is evil. And that you can just search through the scriptures, you'll see. Whenever he mentions evil, you'll see the connection. So he says, this is how you purge the evil from your midst. So what evil was being done here? Somebody leading you away from Yahweh is considered evil. That's an important distinction that we have to understand. So continuing, he says, okay, so he's spoken apostasy, back in verse 5, Yahweh Elohim who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim and redeemed you from the house of bondage. This person has tried to make you stray from the way which Yahweh Elohim commanded you to walk. See, that was the purpose. It wasn't like saying, hey, let's go to Dagon. It was saying, he's trying to get you to stray from the path. And remember, we did the teaching earlier, and and for those who are watching on other teachings, about the path that leads to the door, covered by the blood. Well, they're trying to get you off that path. And what did we say about that path? Well, you're not covered off the path. You see, it's not safe off the path. These are people that are trying to get you to stray from the way, the derech, the path. What did we talk about expanding our definitions of things, or doing what we call this, expansion, like the word way? John 14:6 says, Yeshua says, I am the way. So they're getting you they're trying to make you stray from Yeshua. What else is it? The truth. They're getting to try to get you to stray from the truth. What else is the truth? The Torah. What else is it? The Word. See how big that is? So they're trying to get you to stray from all of that.
That's right.
He says, thus you shall purge the evil, because they're trying to get you to stray from all of that. Yeshua, the truth, the way, the Torah, the life, all of that. They're just trying to get you to stray from life. Because they're all part of the same thing. He says, when your brother, the son of your mother, or the son of your daughter, or the wife of your bosom, or your friend, who is as your own being, entices you secretly, saying, let us go and serve other mighty ones, which you have not known, neither you nor your fathers, of the mighty ones of the peoples which are all around you, near to you or far off from you, from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth. Do not agree with him or listen to him, nor shall your eye pardon him, nor spare him or conceal him, but you shall certainly kill him. Your hand is first against him, and to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. Now bear in mind, that last part of the verse shows you that that person still had to go before the judges and have the decision made, but you would get to do the first blow. He said, you shall stone him with stones until he dies, because he has sought to entice you away from Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim from the house of bondage. And let all Yisrael hear and fear, and not again do any such evil matter as this in your midst. Again, he's talking about this is considered evil. Let's kind of go back for a second. In Deuteronomy 18, we were talking about a prophet that claims something and then it doesn't happen. In Deuteronomy 13, we're talking about a prophet claims something that does happen. Both are being discussed as false. One is obviously false because they said it would happen and it didn't happen. Well, that's a no-brainer. Hey, the guy said it would happen, it didn't happen. He's a charlatan, he's a liar, it doesn't work. That's easy. But what about the one that says something and it does happen? Because people have been, I know because I've met people, I've not been there myself, but they've been in churches where, oh, this guy said this was going to happen and it happened. Or I've seen people healed in that church. And I've seen all this. I'm glad all that stuff did happen. I'm glad they were healed and everything else. But don't ask me how it happened. Everything that happens, either Yahweh allowed it or made it happen. So we just leave it at that. But the point was, that doesn't validate the place it happened. Because these are things that people claim which has them in every religion in the world. Every religion can claim miracles and all these other things because the signs and wonders are there to strengthen people's belief in that particular system. And so we have to realize that. So it's not a shock that these things happen in every, it doesn't matter if you call it into Buddhism, into Taoism, into New Age, into whatever. They all have their signs and wonders and miracles that they claim they've seen. And they probably have. It doesn't say anywhere in here that they don't happen. It says here, the guy says it's going to happen, it happens. So we're not surprised by that. And so let's understand that. But one of the things I want to caution you about as we're going through this is that we have a very easy opportunity, and the last part of this I want to connect to Deuteronomy 18. It says, even if it's your brother, or your father, or your mother, or your family member, you cannot pardon what they do. Now, I want to say something really strong. I'm not going to name any names, but I don't want to have this taken wrong. I'm not jealous, nor am I trying to tear down any ministry. But all of you are aware, because I'm sure you're aware of some of the ministries I'm thinking about in my head, who have said things were going to happen and they didn't, and you still follow and support these guys. Cut that out. Oh, but they're so good. This guy was so good too. Signs and wonders all happening. Okay, oh, and even if it's your brother, but it's my brother. It says, but you got to kill him. But there are ministries out there naming dates and other things, and have gone, and some of them have named dates for years, and they still keep, and every time they name another date. Now, you know who I'm talking about, probably. Stop supporting these people. Amen. You are breaking the scripture. I'm not against their ministry. I'm not trying to put them out of business. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm trying to encourage you to be in line with this word. It says, if they say something that Yahweh, thus said Yahweh, and it doesn't happen, they're false. Amen. Okay? I'm telling you that this is going to happen, in this coming year. And none of that stuff happens. By the way, I want to prepare you in advance. The blood moons are going to do nothing. All those guys need to be ignored after that. Period. I don't care who it was, because a lot of people have jumped on that bandwagon. And what are they going to say when nothing happens? I don't mean nothing. Okay, some world events may happen. Now, Messiah is not coming because of these things. I'm going to do that through the rest of the teaching, just kind of talk to you a little bit about how I know he's not coming like next year. Okay? Because he's not. And so we're already halfway through this 2-year blood moon thing that everybody's all hyped up about. And we're going to get past it all. And nothing will have happened. Maybe so, some financial issues or some wars. But that's happened all throughout history on these blood moons. People are not promoting that. They're promoting Mashiach and the beginning of the tribulation. Isn't that what they're saying?
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
It's not going to happen. And so then what happens? People are going to still end up supporting these guys. Cut it out. They have disqualified themselves. I've tried to contact some of them and say, please stop doing this. Your ministry will be over or marginalized as being just a joke. Stop naming dates. You will never hear dates from me. I will tell you exactly when Mashiach is coming, though, without a date. I'll give you a definite sign when we're going to be close, before the end of this teaching. And you will absolutely know that when you see that sign, you'll know Mashiach is almost here. I won't tell you when that's going to happen, though. I don't know. And I would never claim to guess. But I can tell you from Scripture certain things that will tell us for sure he's coming soon. And you'll understand when I get there. Just be patient with me. But these guys that are naming these specific we're going to pass all those dates. And I think that every time people name dates, I know Abba's sitting there going, well, I guess that's another date we have to pass because I got to show all these people that they're just not so smart. That they're not listening to me when I tell them not to name dates. But they do it anyway. And I'm trying to encourage you based on this two verses, two chapters, 18 and 13. It's not even an excuse to say, but he's such a good teacher and I like him and I've been following him for 15 years. So what? Either you're going to obey the commandments in the scriptures or not. Now, you're not going to take him out and stone him, but you're going to have to say, you're done. Without consequences, they'll never stop. And they're hurting people. Because people are believing them and selling all their stuff and doing all these things or making life decisions because they're believing these guys. Guess what? The whole Adventist church did that in 1844. Guess what? It's a long time since 1844. Yeshua's still not here. There's been every generation that's ever lived has had some group convinced it was happening. Every generation always was convinced it was going to happen in a generation. Oh, that group, we understand why they were wrong, but now because this is happening, we are definitely the one. Every generation. So we're not any different. And you know what? It just may not be us. Everything shows that it will, but it showed them too. Even the apostles thought it was them. They did. And so no surprise we think it's us. But really, I just feel very strong about this thing where I'm like, why is everybody still listening to these few people who have for years been doing this and keep changing their dates and changing their dates? These are Messianic people. Stop following and supporting these people till they stop the behavior. And even then, I'm not sure you should go back. And I like some of these guys too. And yes, at times they're very good. But you got to stop this stuff. All right. Now, let's go to 1 John chapter 4. 1 John chapter 4. Because this is the cry aloud, spare not teaching. Okay, we have to this is the serious stuff. I know we joked around earlier today with some stuff, but now we're serious. Because if you don't get this, you are liable to fall for the false. Because there's a false one coming. It says, even if possible, the elect will be convinced. I'm trying to show you how to know the difference. That's ultimately where we're headed, so that you can know the difference. 1 John chapter 4, and in verse 1. Beloved ones, do not believe every spirit, but prove the spirits whether they are of Elohim, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. Okay, let's stop right there. Beloved ones, do not believe every spirit. Oh, the Father told me to tell you. Well, how do you know it was the Father? Oh, because I heard a voice, right? The Spirit told me, or the Spirit told me this, or the Spirit told me that. Did you test the Spirit? Oh, no, of course not. I mean, the Father wouldn't allow that. 1 John 4:1. Beloved, do not believe every spirit. Listen, you've got three voices in your head, and I'm not calling you like schizophrenic, but you have. You have three voices in your head. Two of them never shut up. There's your voice, yourself, that self-talk voice, the spirit in man. Okay, you got three spirits in trying to vie for attention in you. Spirit in man never shuts up. Hasatan spirit never shuts up. And the still small voice of the Ruach, who's waiting for everybody else to shut up so you can listen to him. Okay? He's just sitting going, okay, you guys keep jibber-jabber, I'll wait. He's like, I'll wait, no problem. But yet, Christians especially, Messianics are almost as bad, they trust every voice, every move, every feeling they get. Oh, I had this vision and I had this dream. Did you test it? Oh, no, of course not. Well, the book says to test it. He says, you know why? He says, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. He's saying, look, realize that a lot of these false prophets are out there claiming, now we go back to Ezekiel 22, divining the lie, claiming a false vision, claiming that Yahweh said when Yahweh hadn't said. Right. Now he says, by this you know the spirit of Elohim. Every spirit that confesses that Yeshua Mashiach has come in the flesh is of Elohim. And every spirit that does not confess that Yeshua Mashiach has come in the flesh is not of Elohim, and this is the spirit of the anti-Messiah which you heard is coming and is now already in the world. So first of all, everybody must understand that the anti-Mashiach is already here. It's not a person yet, necessarily. It's a behavioral pattern, it's a purpose, it's a function. Because the anti-Messiah was already in the world when John's talking. That's 2,000 years ago. Okay, so John is saying, he says, you heard is coming and is now already in the world. The spirit of anti-Mashiach. So what is the spirit of anti-Mashiach? We're going to get into it a little bit more. So we have all of this going on. He says, verse 4, he says, you are of Elohim, little children, and have overcome them, because he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. They are of the world because they speak as of the world, and the world hears them. We are of Elohim, and the one knowing Elohim hears us. He who is, by the way, the one knowing Elohim hears us. See, the one who doesn't know Elohim is the one you can't reach. They don't have eyes to see yet or ears to hear. We talked about that earlier. Not on this recording, but earlier, remember? Okay? And so what is he talking about here? Exactly what I was talking about earlier. He says, the one knowing Elohim hears. In 1 John 2, it says, those who say they know him and keep not his commandments are liars. Okay? So what do we have here? Is that this is a relational thing. He says, those that actually have this relationship with Elohim, they hear you. They can receive what you're saying. Those who don't, can't. He said, so we are of Elohim. The one knowing Elohim hears us. He who is not of Elohim does not hear us. By this we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of delusion.
Amen.
Let's break that down. Let's get away from the evangelical, Pentecostal, whatever, and think what this whole spirit thing is and just make it more simple. The spirit of truth, what did we say truth was? Torah, Yeshua, the Word, the way, the light, right? So we're talking about here the spirit of Yeshua and the spirit of a lie, the delusion. And so that's a very important little distinction going on right here, the spirit of truth. Now, in this teaching, I also did the 3-verse loop that we talked about on earlier today, but I want to put it also on this teaching. So let's define truth. John 14:6, Yeshua says, I am the truth. Right? He says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. John 14:6. In Psalm 119, 142, and 160, it says, thy word is truth, and the entirety of thy word is truth, and thy Torah is truth. So you have 2 verses in Psalm 119. The word is truth, Yeshua is the truth. John 1:14, the word put on flesh.
That's right.
The truth put on flesh. The Torah put on flesh. So that's an important thing that we have to have. In verse, I have it written down here. So in verse 160, it said the sum or entirety of your word is truth. In verse 142, it says the Torah is truth. This is in Psalm 119. Okay. By the way, delusion is translated from the Greek plane, which means fraudulence, straying from orthodoxy or piety. So it's fraudulent. It's not just delusion, it's a fraud. What is a fraud? Something that claims to be something and it's really not. So it's a fraud. So now we're looking for the spirit of anti-Messiah. We're looking for a fraud. We're looking for a fraud. Keep that in your mind as we go through this. We're looking for something fraudulent in today's times to be looking for to identify the anti-Mashiach spirit.
Right.
Let's go now to Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7 and in verse 15. I want to just make sure I didn't skip anything. Matthew chapter 7 and in verse 15. Okay, but beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are savage wolves. By their fruits you shall know them. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? So every good tree yields good fruit, and a rotten tree yields wicked fruit. A good tree is unable to yield wicked fruit, and a rotten tree yield good fruit. He says, verse 19, every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So then by their fruits you shall know them. So in other words, he's saying, look, beware of these false prophets. You're going to know them by their fruit. So you're going to have to look at their fruit. What is their fruit? What they're doing. Look what they're doing. Listen to what they're saying. What they're saying and what they're doing, that's the fruit of where they're coming from. He says, not everyone, listen now, verse 21, not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, shall enter into the reign of the heavens, but he who is doing the desire of my Father in the heavens. Not everyone who says to me, Master, Master. In other words, there are going to be people, let's get the right context here, that are going to him, properly to him, and say, Master, Master. they're going to call him master. He says, but not all of them are going to enter the reign. He says, but the ones who are doing the desire of my Father. You see, you have a lot of people trying to call Messiah master, and they're not doing the will of the Father.
That's right.
What is the will of the Father? I don't know. Let's go to the covenant. Exodus 19. If you obey, I will take you as my people. That's the will of the Father.
Amen.
It's his desire that you keep his commandments. He says, many shall say to me in that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name? We're in verse 22. Have we not prophesied in your name? In other words, have we not spoken with authority in your authority? At least that's what they thought they were doing. And cast out demons in your name with your authority, and done many mighty works in your name. And that's, by the way, in your name meaning claiming your authority, not necessarily having it. Moses had the authority. Isaiah had the authority. In other words, they were anointed from Yahweh. But there are people running around all over the place claiming to be anointed of Yahweh, claiming to have authority. There's no lack of those guys. He said, and done mighty works in your name. Benny Hinn can claim all that, and does every day. Okay? But we know he's false. He says, and then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me. Here's the key. You who work lawlessness. Now connect that back to verse 21. He says, but those who are doing the desire of my Father. What's the desire? To be lawful. That's why I said, the next time when someone calls you a legalist, you say, absolutely. Let's go to Matthew 7. The choice is either being a legalist in verse 21 or being a sinner or lawless in verse 23. I'm going with legalist.
Amen.
I'm going with legalist, and I'm not offended to say it. You can't offend me. And by the way, there is a teaching, it wasn't on the table, called Let Me Not Be Ashamed. So you can download that somewhere on the different websites, because that one deals with this whole idea of let me do all the things I need to do and let me not be ashamed.
Amen.
I'm not ashamed to be called a legalist. Call me what all you want. My Father in heaven does everything legal. Let's continue. He says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and does them shall be like a wise man who builds his house on a rock. And the rain came down, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them shall be like a foolish man built his house on the sand. And the rain came down, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and they beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. Now notice what it says here next. And it came to me when Yeshua had ended these words that the people were astonished at his teaching. Remember I said this verse was coming. For he was teaching them as one possessing authority, not as the scribes. They recognized the anointing. They hadn't fully recognized who he really was, but at least they were now recognizing he was not like these other guys. He was at least a prophet. He was speaking the word of Yahweh with authority. So that's a very important distinction. Yeshua spoke with authority. Okay, so let's just get into this a little bit. He says, okay, beware the false prophets in verse 15. They do come looking like they're wolves in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they're wolves. They look like they're sheep, though. By their fruits you shall know them. He's going to say, I never knew you, depart from me, you who work lawlessness. So there's something about lawlessness that identifies these false, these anti-Mashiach people. And then a Greek word translated lawlessness is anomia, which means violation of Torah, anti-Torah, or against the Torah. So there's going to also be this connection to being against the Torah, or anti the Torah. That's important. So if lawlessness is to be against or anti-Torah, and Yeshua is the Torah, then lawlessness is to be against or anti-Yeshua. In other words, to be anti-Messiah. That's your connection to anti-Messiah spirit. The anti-Torah, antinomia, or anomia, is also anti-Yeshua, anti-Messiah. That's your anti-Messiah spirit.
Wow.
Those that are against the Torah. Keep that in your mind as we're going into this. In 1 John 3:4, you don't have to go there, it says, everyone doing sin also does lawlessness. Anti-Torah, anti-Messiah, and sin is lawlessness.
Amen.
So there's your definition of the anti-Messiah. It's those who are doing lawlessness. They're breaking the Torah. They're breaking the Torah. Matthew 24 and verse 11. Keep these things. We're going to get to a huge revelation in a second here, and that revelation needs to be built on what we just talked about. That being against the Torah is being anti-Mashiach, anti-Messiah. Matthew 24 and in verse 11. Matthew 24 and in verse 11. And many false prophets shall rise up and lead many astray. We know that this is talking about these end time events. Everybody's familiar who wants to study end times are going to, Daniel 9, Matthew 24, Revelation, these things. So we know Matthew 24 is all about these end time stuff. He says, and many false prophets shall rise up and lead many astray. By astray, he means what? Away from that straight and narrow path, away from the Torah. Out from under the covering, away from the Torah. He says, many false prophets will rise and lead many astray. Verse 12, and because of the increase in Torahlessness, in lawlessness, the love of many shall become cold. What love is he talking about? If you love me, keep my commandments. What are we told to do? Love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your being, and guard his commandments. There's a teaching I did called Love and Torah. In that teaching, you'll find, especially in the Tanakh, but also in the Brit, almost everywhere love is mentioned, Torah is mentioned too. Or almost anywhere Torah observance is mentioned, love is mentioned too. They're not separate things. They are connected. If you love me, keep my commandments. Love me with all your heart, with all your strength, and guard my commands. Over and over and over, we're all throughout the scriptures. Okay? Because people in Christianity especially like to say, well, it's just about love, love, love. Where all of a sudden we're like the Beatles in the 60s. Love, love, right? And then there's no obedience. And Father says, I want you to love me in your obedience.
Amen.
Love me and be obedient. Be obedient because you love me. But love me and be obedient. All right, so now we see because of this lawlessness, the love, the agape, the love, the vertical love is going to wax cold.
That's right.
Then it's going to get cold. He says, but he who shall have endured till the end shall be saved. Well, there's your whole, forget about the once saved, always saved, or you're saved now. It says you have to endure till the end, and then you shall, not are, shall. Then you shall be saved. If you endure to the end. Endure what? Endure all of these false prophets, all the false teachings, all the temptations, all the leading astray attempts. If you can endure through all of that and stand, and Paul says, and having done all, stand, then you shall be saved. So we have that here in Matthew 24. Now we wanted to go, okay, to verse 13, we're good. Okay. The word love here I wrote down in the Greek is agape, which is Elohim level love. So we're talking about that kind of love. We're not saying the love of many shall wax cold, because people use that and think, well, that's why people are fighting with each other and marriages are breaking. It's not that love we're talking about here. This is the love that's vertical. He says that agape love, he says, because of the increase in lawlessness, the love of many shall become cold. Look, what did 1 John say? And we're going to go there actually in a second because I want to read it. He says, well, let's just go there now. Okay? Well, first go to John 14:15. Let's go to John, on the way down to 1 John, we'll go to John 14:15. John 14:15. He says, if you love me, you shall guard my commands. If you love me, you shall guard my commands. Yeshua was saying, this is in red letters, in the red letters Bibles, right? By the way, Christianity never mentions this whole thing to get it right. He says, look, he says, truly, truly, verse 12, he says, I say to you, he who believes in me, the works that I do, he shall do also, and greater works than these. There's a teaching I have called, What Did Yeshua Do? Not like the old WWJD bracelets, what would Jesus do? No, what did Yeshua do? He says, because the works that he did, we're going to do even greater works. He says, so that's important. And he goes, and greater works than these he shall do because I go to my Father. And he says, whatever you ask in my name, I shall do in order that the Father might be esteemed in the Son, if. See, they don't ever get to that part where they read it right. Only that stuff happens if you love me and guard my commands. Otherwise, forget about all that stuff. And if you love me and guard my commands, then I'm going to ask Abba to send you the Ruach. Okay, so all these spirit-filled people in these spirit-filled churches doing nothing commandment-wise are liars. Now, they're not doing it on purpose. They've been lied to. Be careful that you don't think I'm attacking them. I feel horrible that they've been lied to and they're stuck in that lie. But they're lying because they don't know any better. It's an innocent lie. They've been lied to and they're just continuing that lie. How do I know? Look at 1 John. Go to 1 John chapter 2. 1 John chapter 2, and we begin in verse 3. And by this we know that we know him if we guard his commands. Who's the him he's talking about? Yeshua, verse 1 talks about that. My little children, I write this to you so that you do not sin. And if anyone sins, we have an intercessor with the Father, Yeshua Messiah, a righteous one. By the way, a righteous one means that he always did what was right. Who determines what is right? Yahweh. How do we know what's right? It's in the Torah. He told us. Isn't it nice of him to tell us what's right and what's wrong? You don't have to guess. He tells us. Okay, and we get to verse 3. It says, and by this we know that we know him. Knowing is a relational understanding. We have a relationship with him, so we know him. Okay, when it says, and Adam knew his wife, it's not just talking about something sexual. They had an intimate relationship. He knew his wife. There's times when people may say something about you and come to you and say, you know, so-and-so said that about you, and I was a little bit concerned. And you look at them and say, well, how could you even think to believe that? If you knew me, or you should know me better than that, you might say. You know me better than that, you would say. Because you think you have enough of a relationship with that person would never think that of you. He says, the one who says, I know him and does not guard his commands is a liar, and the truth is not in him. Okay, so your average Christian, okay, is going to say, well, I do only the things that are in the red letters. Well, Yeshua didn't give a whole lot of commandments in the red letters. He told you to love your neighbor. He told you to love Yahweh. By the way, that's in Deuteronomy and in Leviticus. So you have these other things. It's not new. He didn't make up anything. Well, now I have to love my neighbor as myself. Well, that was always required. Right. Well, now it's about circumcision of the heart. That was always required. But nobody ever reads anything left in Matthew to know. There's nothing new in the New Testament, just a lot of stuff that's true.
Amen. Amen.
It's not new. Well, that's all we have to do now. That's not true. When he says, if you love me, guard my commands, we must understand that Yeshua is the commandment giver. I'm going to say something real quick. We are definitely going to go long on this. I'm going to say something real quick, but it's important. I'm not going to prove it today. I'm going to do it in a future teaching. But I want you to have the seed planted. We have never, on this planet, interacted with the Father. The only one we've ever interacted with is the Son. In the beginning, in Genesis chapter 1, Father and Son together did everything in chapter 1 before there was any sin or death. Remember Tameh and Tahor? I talked about that briefly. You know, this idea of clean and unclean in Ezekiel 22? Yeah. Those protocols are much more stringent on our interacting with the Father than with the Son. Apparently the Son can have dinner or lunch with Abraham, be face-to-face with Moses, and all this other stuff. Yeshua himself, though, says, no one has seen the Father except me. Nor at any time has even heard his voice. Wow. Yeshua himself said that. He says, no one has seen the Father nor heard his voice at any time. You've heard that verse? Yep. So then who was Moses talking to? Who did the people hear? Who had lunch with Abraham? Yeshua. He said, I came to show you the Father. And the Jews are all like, what do you mean? We have a relationship with the Father. Because Yahweh said over and over, I was like a father to them. But he wasn't the father. He acted in the role of a father. By the way, you probably have children, and you probably have a father. Wow, look at that. You have a father, and you're a father. I have a father, and I'm a father. Is that such a tough concept? Yeshua was a father to them. He created them. But he wasn't the father. And Yeshua was wanting to show them there's more. So now, who's the one on Mount Sinai giving the commandments? Yeshua. Paul tells you that too. So he's the commandment giver. If he's the commandment giver, the lawgiver, then when he says, if you love me, guard my commands, what is he talking about? Just the red letters in the Brit? He's talking about the commandments he gave at Sinai. So if Christianity could only understand that, they would understand this whole thing. Okay, and there's a whole lot longer thing, and that should have been in the other teachings about these little rabbi trails, so we're not going to go there right this second, but where I kind of explain more about this Yeshua thing. I'll give you a little bit of it. This is your bedtime story. In the beginning of time, the Father and Son, I believe, this is my delusion, okay? I'm allowed a delusion like everybody else. The Father and Son are having a conversation. The Son goes up to the Father and says, Father, I want to make something. I want to build something. Boys do that, you know. And now we know Yeshua is not really a boy, and Father's not really a father. They're Elohim. We are told Father and Son because it's the best way we can understand them. Because to really be Father and Son, there would have to be a mother and a birth and all this other stuff. Their relationship, to the best that we can understand, is Father and Son. So like a son, he wants to make something. And he gives them this whole thing about people and the earth and the solar system and the universe and all this stuff. And the Father, knowing the end from the beginning, says, well, you do realize they're going to screw it up. You're going to have to die for them in order for you to have them to live forever and all this other stuff. Are you willing to do that? So Yeshua had to be slain before the foundation of the earth. And then the Father, it says he was willing to give his only begotten Son, right? He had to make a decision to say, I have to be willing to let you do it. So I believe that all happened before day one of creation. Father and Son are having a conversation. They plan the whole thing out. So the Father says this. He says, Son, once there's sin or death, in other words, life that can die in sin, I can no longer interact with your thing, your project. So I'm going to help you get it started, which is why in chapter 1, Yahweh's never mentioned. It just says Elohim. And when it's just Elohim like that, often it's referring to both and not just the one. Chapter 2, when there's something to interact with, we're introduced to the Yahweh Elohim, the specific one of the two. And so that's the one we get to interact with. By the way, my name is Stephen, my son's name is Stephen, we have the same name. So like in Genesis, when fire and brimstone is coming down, it says that Yahweh called down fire and brimstone from Yahweh in heaven. So Yahweh down here had Yahweh up there, two different beings, bring the fire and brimstone. They happen to have the same name, no big deal. Very common. Okay. So because of the laws of interaction, Yahweh says, okay, great. I mean, the Father says, okay, great. Son, you're on your own. When it's all cleaned up and finished, I'll show up. So what happens at the end of Revelation? Revelation 20, the last thing before the kingdom actually starts, sin and death are thrown into the lake of fire.
Yes, Lord.
Right? End of Revelation 20, it says sin and death are thrown in the lake of fire. No more sin, no more death, no more problems with Tameh. Nothing's Tameh. Then the whole universe is mikvahd in fire. There's a new heaven and a new earth. And then it makes this great pronouncement. And the way it's worded, it almost sounds like it never happened before. Like it's this great new thing. It says, where am I up to? Chapter 1 of Revelation. It says, I'm assuming not chapter 21. Chapter 21. I was in chapter 1. Okay. It says, and I saw a renewed heaven and a renewed earth, and the former heaven and former earth were passed away. Sea is no more. And I, Yochanan, saw the set-apart city, the renewed Jerusalem, coming down out of the heaven. By the way, it's coming down out of the heaven here, so I don't know why everybody wants to go there. Prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. You can go there, but it's coming here, so it's up to you. Actually, you don't really get a choice. And I heard, you just don't. I heard a loud voice from the heaven saying, see, now this is this great announcement. See, the booth of Elohim is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. And Elohim himself shall be with them and be their Elohim. Because now the Father is showing up with the Son. Because that has never happened since chapter 1 of Genesis. Now I'll do a teaching that kind of proves that out a lot more. But hopefully you're kind of receiving that. So now, if you understand all of that, 1 John makes more sense, doesn't it? He says, those who say they love me and keep not my commandments. I said, when he says, when those who say they know him and guard not his commandments are liars. Because his commandments are the Torah. He was the one on Sinai. He was the one giving them the commandments. Very important that we get this in 1 John. So then he says in verse 4, he says, the one who says, I know him and does not guard his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. Yeshua is not in him. The Torah is not in him. But whoever guards his word, the truth, the Torah, Yeshua, truly the love of Elohim has been perfected. What love? The one that waxed cold in other people. See, now, this is how it gets perfected. If you're guarding commands, now you're flowing in that love. When you're lawless, the love waxes cold. It grows cold. You see how that connects to what Yeshua was talking about? Yeah. And he says, by this we know that we are in him. He says, the one who says he stays in him ought himself also to walk even as he walked. We have an example. We're supposed to follow him. You know, when he said to the disciples, hey, follow me, it wasn't like saying, get behind me, I'm going somewhere, just follow me so you don't get lost. The word in Greek means be in the same way as I am. Follow me means be in the same way as I am. It doesn't mean just follow me literally, like get behind me so you don't get lost. Although in a sense, it's get behind me so you don't get lost. Follow in his footsteps. But it really has to do with be like him. Be like him. Now let's go to 2 Peter chapter 2 and in verse 1. 2 Peter chapter 2 and in verse 1. But there also came to be false prophets among the people, as also among you there shall be false teachers, who shall secretly bring in destructive heresies. They're going to secretly bring in destructive heresies and deny the master who brought them, bringing swift destruction on themselves. Okay, there's also came to be. There also came, in other words, it already happened. So there's nothing new happening now that hasn't already been happening. There came to be among the people, as also among you, there shall be. There had happened in the past, and there shall be among you. Who's among you? The people he's talking to. He's talking to the dispersion. He says, there shall be false teachers who secretly bring in destructive heresies and deny the master who brought them, bringing swift destruction on themselves. How do you deny the master? It's not something like, I don't believe in Yeshua. It's more like, I don't believe in the Torah. Well, that is Yeshua. I don't believe in the law. Well, that is Yeshua. I'm going against the truth. I'm believing a lie. Well, that's rejecting Yeshua. And many shall follow their destructive ways, because of whom the way of truth, what's the way of truth? The way of the Torah. The derech of the way, right? The derech, the way of truth, of emet, the truth, shall be evil spoken of. So when I turn on cable and find a guy preaching from the mainstream telling me that it's evil to keep the commandments, and these guys are out there. These guys are actually out there. I watched, and many of you have heard these guys like this, I was watching every now and then. I go on and find all these teachers and check the pulse on what they're all teaching. Because I got to know what I'm up against. What are they trying to convince people of? And I found a guy I'd never heard of before, but you probably all know about this guy called Joseph Prince. Yes. And Mr. Prince was doing some quote out of Galatians where he said, the Torah, he said, believe it or not, the Torah does the opposite of what you think. It curses and doesn't bless. I was shocked the lightning bolt didn't hit him at the time. But I couldn't believe it. I hit record on my TV and saved it for a while. So something happened to my DVR just to prove to people that teachers are teaching like that. That's the destructive heresy. They're calling the way of truth evil. And people say, I've never heard that. You go and listen and hear that. They're out there all saying it. There's teacher upon teacher calling the Messianic movement and all the things that we're learning about Torah evil, destructive, from the pits of hell. I can show you, want the videos? I'll give you the links. Just email me. I can show you teacher after teacher that is calling the way of truth evil. Going on. There's a guy, Steven Anderson. You can find his video. It's called Something Against the Messianic or the Hebrew Roots. You can't believe what he says. You can't believe what he says. And actually, after you hear this teaching, it would be good to go listen to his, because now you'll understand really how confused he gets. Let's continue. So we're told here about destructive heresies. Let's understand what heresy is. Heresy is translated from the Greek, haera says, well, I don't know how to pronounce Greek, which is a choice, a disunion or a sect, a party. So they're believing destructive heresies, which is really destructive sects or disunions or parties or choices. Oh, I'm going to give you a different decision you can make. You don't have, you know what? It goes back to Genesis chapter 2 or 3 where the enemy says, did Yahweh really say? That's a destructive heresy. He's trying to get you to make a choice and make a wrong choice. See, that was the Ruach again. I hadn't had that in my notes saying, hey, wait a minute, that's the Nachash, the serpent saying, did Yahweh really say? So the way of truth, according to these guys, is basically called evil. Revelation chapter 12 and verse 9, you don't have to go there, it says, it is Satan who leads the whole world astray. Okay, Hasatan who leads the whole world astray. Let's go to John chapter 8. John chapter 8. Yochanan chapter 8 and in verse 43. And I'm trying to find in my notes where do I want to do that. Oh, okay, that'll work. In John chapter 8, verse 43, why do you not know what I say? He says, because you're unable to hear my word. He says, that's why you don't know what I say. You're unable to hear my word. What does that mean? You have to have eyes to see and ears to hear. Why do we find that in verses all over the place? I didn't put it in these notes, but you know those verses. Father, give them eyes to see and ears to hear.
That's right.
Okay. He says, the reason you can't hear me is because you don't have ears to hear. He says, that's why you don't know what I'm saying. He says, you are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you wish to do. He was a murderer from the beginning and has not stood in the truth, in the Torah, in Yeshua, in the way, in the light. I mean, those are all, remember, we were talking about doing the amplification of the word. Because there is no truth, Torah, Yeshua, the word in him. When he speaks the lie, he speaks of his own, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Now, when we're talking about liars, what is liars? It says, if you claim that you know him and do not his commandments, you're a liar. Well, not the spirit of Hasatan here? The father of the devil, it says? Because he has no relationship with him anymore. He has lost and broken and severed his relationship with the Father. So the truth is not in him. Because he doesn't know him. If he knew him, he would keep the commandments. He wouldn't be doing all the stuff that he does. He says, and because I speak the truth, you do not believe me. That's pretty scary. He says, who of you proves me wrong concerning sin? And if I speak the truth, the law, the Torah, why do you not believe me? He who is of Elohim hears the words of Elohim, but therefore you do not hear because you are not of Elohim. Wow. That's strong stuff. That's strong stuff. Let's continue. In chapter 24 of Matthew again. Let's go back to Matthew 24 and in verse 4. Yeshua answering said to them, take heed that no one leads you astray. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am the Messiah, and they shall lead many astray. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about people either saying they're claiming themselves to be Messiah or they're claiming that he's the Messiah. He says, if you look at the whole verse, it says they're going to come in my authority. They're going to claim my authority. They're going to come claiming my authority, saying that Yeshua is, that he is the Messiah. I'm coming in the authority of Messiah. I'm claiming he's Messiah. He said, but they're going to lead many astray. Now let's drop down to verse 23. He says, if anyone then says to you, look, here is the Messiah, or there, do not believe. For false messiahs and false prophets shall arise, and they shall show great signs and wonders so as to lead astray, if possible, even the chosen ones. That should scare you. Whatever's going to happen is going to be so powerful that if possible, it would lead astray even the chosen ones. Verse 25, see, I have forewarned you. So you're being forewarned. That's important. Those are very important. You know, in 2 Peter, we're all familiar with the verses talking about Paul's writings where the untaught and unstable twist Paul's writings to their own destruction. So people are using those writings to lead, basically, this delusion into lawlessness. So you got to be careful of that stuff. Ezekiel 22, we've read that already, so I'm not going to go back there because that's actually in my notes, but we've already read it. Okay, let me interrupt at this point and, okay, this is, yeah, I definitely want to do it here, I think. Okay, let's look at this description that we're getting. Okay, we're getting a description of this anti-Mashiach. We're getting this description of this anti-Mashiach. Okay? And so I want to go to Thessalonians now and like really lay it out. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And we're going to read almost the whole chapter here. As to the coming of our Master Yeshua Messiah and gathering together to him, we ask you, brothers, not to become easily unsettled in mind or troubled, either by spirit or by word or by letter, as if from us, as if the day of Yahweh has come. In other words, don't let people convince you it's come when it isn't come yet. He said, let no one deceive you in any way, because the falling away is to come first, and the man of lawlessness is to be revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called Elohim, or that is worshipped, so that he sits as Elohim in the dwelling place of Elohim, showing himself that he is Elohim. Do you not remember that I told you this while I was still with you? And now you know what restrains for him to be revealed in this time. For the secret of lawlessness is already at work, only until he who now restrains comes out of the midst. And then the lawless one shall be revealed, whom the master shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and bring to naught with the manifestation of his coming. So this is all going to be rendered finally at an end at his coming. He says, the coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Hasatan, with all power and signs and wonders of falsehood, and with all deceit of unrighteousness in those perishing, because they did not receive the love of the truth. They did not receive the love of Torah, the love of Yeshua, in order for them to be saved. Oh, you're teaching salvation by works. No, I'm telling you that to be saved, ultimately, even though salvation has been offered to you, you have to go ahead and endure to the end. and they shall be saved. And it says that you must have a love of the Torah, the truth. Yeshua is the truth. The Torah is the truth. The Word is the truth. He says you need that in order to be saved. So apparently you actually need something in order to be saved that just wasn't automatically given to you. I mean, this is after Yeshua was dead, buried, and resurrected. It says, verse 11, and for this reason Elohim sends them a working delusion for them to believe the falsehood, in order that all should be judged who did not believe the truth, did not believe the Torah, Yeshua, the light, but have delighted in the unrighteousness. What is unrighteousness? Breaking the commandments. Oh, they love their shrimp. They love their lobster. They love their pork. They love their Christmas right now, right? But we ought to give thanks to Elohim always for you. He says we ought to give thanks to Elohim always for you, brothers, beloved of the Master, because Elohim from the beginning chose you to be saved in the set apartness of spirit and belief in the Torah, the truth, Yeshua, etc. Unto which he called you by our good news for the obtaining of esteem of our Master Yeshua. Okay. By the way, that's another one of those Christianese words. We keep talking about the Christianese things. Glory. Nobody knows what glory is. So we'll talk about that another time. But that's a word in most translations say glory or esteem, and we just don't understand. All right. So what's going on here? So we have this lawless one's being kind of pointed out here, and that he won't really be dealt with finally till Yeshua returns. That's what he says here very clearly. Hopefully we saw that. Okay? And by the way, when we talked about this saved thing in 1 Timothy, it says, who desires all men to be saved and come to knowledge of truth. So there is a desire of Abba, of Mashiach, that all men would be saved. We just know, unfortunately, they will choose not to be. So that's one of those things that's sad, but we have to accept and we have to deal with.
That's right.
Okay. So let's break this down a little bit. It says, don't be unsettled, let no one deceive you in any way, because the falling away has to come first, and the man of lawlessness is to be revealed, the son of destruction, who's going to exalt himself above all that is called Elohim and that is worshipped, so that he sits as Elohim in the dwelling place. Okay. Now we're going to get to the serious part. You have to be ready for this. And there's no joke here. This is why we do this teaching. The greatest setup of all time has been perpetrated on all of the world. That setup has been perpetrated and pushed on us for about 2,000 years now. The setup is to lead you away from Yeshua and the Torah. That setup is Jesus Christ. That is your anti-Messiah. When I first was going to do this teaching, I said, what are you going to teach me? I'm going to tell everybody Jesus is the Antichrist. I'm not saying Yeshua. The false fraud. We're talking about fraudulent. Remember we were earlier talking about fraudulent? The fraud that has been perpetrated on the world is the Jesus that you've been sold, who is peace, love, wonderful, hippie freak, and eat whatever you want, and don't worry, everything's great, and don't worry about what my father said to do. You know what I'm saying? This is the fraud.
Yeah. Amen.
Okay. I don't care if you say Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahuwah, Yahoshua, all that. The Jesus has to go. Why? Because Jesus is coming. That's what it's talking about here. That's your lawless one. He's not going to be the Mahdi and this Imam and all this other thing. That the world is loving that idea. Because it says here, even the elect would be, all of the quote-unquote elect are ready for this Imam to come. They're all ready for the anti-Messiah to be a Muslim. So how's that going to fool anybody? Not going to fool anybody. Is the elect going to be fooled by a Muslim Messiah? No. But if Jesus showed up, some people, even in the Messianic, would be like, oh, I always knew. And Jesus is coming. Remember I told you I would tell you for sure that you would know when Mashiach is coming? When Jesus gets here, you know he's coming soon. That's how you'll know. That's a guarantee. Jesus got to come first. Let me explain how this all works out. To be a false Messiah, you have to do what everybody expects the Messiah to do. Right? So what does everybody expect the Messiah to do? They expect the Messiah to beat up a false Messiah. Get me the salt shaker and the pepper shaker, please. This is how I first taught this in Canada. I was sitting at a table with some of the congregation from Beth Shalom in Winnipeg. And the way I did this was with a water bottle, which I have, and a salt and pepper shaker. Now, for those listening on the audio, this won't work as good, but if you're on video, you're going to get it. Okay. So we need somebody to be the false Messiah. They kind of look like the Messiah. We haven't read the verses yet, but we know that the devil himself would look like an angel of light, and his minions like ministers of light. We're going to read those verses here in a little bit. So he's going to look real good. He's going to look like the Messiah in every simple way. He's going to exalt himself above all things, call himself Elohim, sit in the dwelling place and everything. So he's got to look like Messiah. And he's got to beat up a false Messiah. So really, that's the fake out. So we need a false Messiah. That's the setup of this Muslim imam guy. Okay, so this Mahdi, this imam shows up, the Mahdi, and all of Christianity is now expecting Jesus to come and save everybody. And when he does, what do you think is going to happen? They're all going to flip out. They're just going to completely fall out. Yeah. And now we're in worse trouble than we were before. We, the Torah observers. Okay? So this false one comes in, and right now we see how Muslims are torturing Christians and all this other stuff with Christians, right? So that's all, everybody's being set up for this. Jesus shows up and takes this guy out. Everybody's all excited. Even the elect could fall for that. Signs and wonders, abundant food, peace in the world, all for a little period of time. And then we really get into a trap. That's the trap. And then Yeshua has to show up and handle that. Okay? The living waters. There's the setup going on. For 2,000 years, we've been sold. Not just sold. Do you realize that the world had no interest in this Jesus guy, that the Roman Catholics and the other Christians had to kill people and at the sword point to force them to buy into that guy? When Yeshua was here, thousands were drawn to him. After he left, and the real true disciples, more, thousands and thousands were drawn to him. The Jesus guy was then thrown at the world after the early Christians or the early believers were all killed and stuff. Nobody wanted that guy. They had to be forced to have that guy. Made Muslims today look like altar boys. Okay? I mean, they would burn you. I mean, they did worse things than any of these guys are doing. Okay? If you would not confess Jesus. Okay? I mean, it was sword point, burning, threats, everything. The world has been being brainwashed, set up, indoctrinated, getting ready for this guy. What do you hear within Christian music and in the world? It's all about Jesus, not about the Father. We worship Jesus, we love Jesus, we pray to Jesus, we thank Jesus. Everything's Jesus. Am I wrong? Okay, that's right? That's the way it is. Because he's being exalted about everything. What did Yeshua say? Don't come to me, I want to point you to him. It's not about me, it's about my Father. Is that what you see in Christianity? They are all about this cultish, just raptured sort of thinking. They're just adoring of Jesus. There's no thought of the Father. There's no thought of the commandments. There's no thought of any of that stuff. It's Jesus did everything for you. It's all Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. That's the setup. And if you can't break out of that mindset, you could fall for that setup. Because I'm telling you right now, he's coming. Okay, everyone's going in. Rabbi Bergson said Jesus is coming. Yeah, he is. But he ain't Mashiach. He's the false Mashiach. It's like taking an ugly costume, or a real pretty good looking costume, and sticking it over Mashiach. They dressed him up in this false thing, and they paraded him around, but it's not Mashiach. Mashiach is the one we read about here that loves the law, teaches the Torah. He's the legalist. He did everything his Father said. He only wants you to focus on his Father. He doesn't want any attention for himself. That's not the Jesus we're sold. We're told, beware false prophets. What are we told that this false one's going to be? He's going to be teaching against the law. Has anybody in the history of the world been more effective on getting people to break the commandments than Jesus? The personification. Not the real Mashiach, but this created image from the Catholic Church or whoever created it in the first place, the devil, obviously. Okay? This false represent. Has anything ever been more successful at anomy or anti-Mashiach behavior? I mean, that's the whole mission now that you see in these Christian teachers is to make sure, they're preaching to people that never have a thought to do the law, and they're preemptively striking because they're afraid they may run into you one day. And so they got to make sure they're ready for you not to fall into this lie called Torah observance. Lie, it's the only truth there is.
Amen.
Okay? So this is the whole thing that we're reading about here. It's all warning us about this Jesus is coming. Now when I said that, remember this verse again. He says, look, let no one deceive you in any way, because the falling away is to come first, and the man of lawlessness is to be revealed, the son of destruction. There's going to be a falling away. When is that falling away going to happen? Well, when Jesus gets here and everybody goes back to him. The ones that are not strong enough to stand up and go, no, that ain't it, because he doesn't match with this book, and he's teaching against the law and telling everybody Christmas and Easter is wonderful, and eat anything you want. It says here, this is the one who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called Elohim. What is called Elohim? The law. The Torah is of Elohim, of the Father. He says, if you love me, keep my commandments. Love your Yahweh, your Elohim with all your heart, with all your might. Keep the commandments. I mean, he begs them all throughout Genesis to Deuteronomy about 400 million times to keep his commandments. So that's what's of Elohim. He says, or that is worshipped. So he elevates and exalts above all that is worshipped. What is more highly worshipped in Christianity than Jesus? There's nothing. The Father's not worshipped. It's Jesus. He's adored, worshipped, talked. I mean, that's all you hear. As a matter of fact, there are ministries that have written books and things called, it's all about Jesus. Let's continue. He says, so that he sits as Elohim in the dwelling place of Elohim. Now, this is metaphorical and literal. We know that we're looking forward to the sign of the abomination of desolation set up in the holy place. I believe this guy, the Jesus guy, is going to, when they reset up the altar, stand in that place and say, I am Elohim. But there's also a more metaphorical thing. Do you not know that you are the dwelling place? If you got Jesus in your heart, you're fulfilling this verse. You are allowing this false one to sit in the dwelling place of Elohim. Paul tells you, do you not know that you are the dwelling place of Elohim? 1 Corinthians 6:19. So this is really important that we're getting this. This is scary stuff. This is heavy stuff. Okay? This is not game playing stuff. This is not me just trying to be, sort of stirring the pot or whatever. This is the real deal. This is the warning. This is me trying to be a prophet. I'm not claiming to be a prophet. You know what I'm saying? Crying aloud, sparing not, speaking with authority. Please receive this. Jesus is coming. He's not Yeshua. That's all. I don't know how else to say it. Jesus is coming. He's not Yeshua. Let's continue. Keep that in mind as we go through the rest of this. Give us more time so we can understand. Go to Ephesians chapter 4. Okay? This is really important that you're getting this. Ephesians chapter 4. I mean, just think about some of the friends you have that are sort of half in, half out. Okay? They're kind of sort of Torah observant, kind of sort of getting it. If Jesus showed up tomorrow, where do you think they'd end up? And he did signs and wonders, and he did some amazing thing, and wiped out the Muslims and all this other stuff. They'd be right over there. Because even the elect, if possible. It's got to be something that even the elect, if possible. Can you see how this could? I can't see anything else. This Mahdi Muslim guy isn't going to fool any elect. No way. But a guy coming in power and glory and all lit up like an angel of light and doing signs and wonders and calling himself Jesus. It's all what's being set up. Look at the teachings and listen to what's going on. You know what? I've always come from from like a military point of view as a counterintelligence guy. Counterintelligence is trying to figure out what the enemy is doing. So I'm sitting here, when I do these studies, sometimes I sit back and I go, I want to understand, what is the enemy doing? The enemy is not, slack in what he's doing. He's busy doing stuff. What is he doing? Well, he's preparing everybody for this. It's a great setup. Can't you see how amazing this setup is? It's beautiful. It's a beautiful setup. Brilliant setup. And it will work on some people. Continuing, Ephesians chapter 4 in verse 11. Ephesians 4:11. And he himself gave some as emissaries, some as prophets, some as evangelists, some as shepherds, teachers, for the perfecting of the set-apart ones, to the work of service, to a building up of the body of Messiah, until we all come to the unity of belief and of the knowledge of the Son of Elohim, to a perfect man, to the measure and stature of the completeness of Messiah, so that we should no longer be children tossed and borne about by every word of teaching, by the trickery of men and cleverness, unto the craftiness of leading astray. See, remember that word leading astray gets us back to all those other verses talking about anti-Mashiach. This leading astray is your hint to those other verses we've already covered. Of leading astray, but maintaining the truth, the Torah, Yeshua, in love, we grow up in all respects into him who is the head, Mashiach. He says, from whom the entire body joined knit together, etc., etc. Get to verse 17. So this I say, and the witness in the master, that you shall no longer walk as the Gentiles walk, the nations walk, in the futility of their mind, having been darkened in their understanding, having been estranged from the life of Elohim, because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their heart, who having become callous, have given themselves up to indecency, to work on all uncleanness with greediness. But you have not learned Messiah. You have not so learned Messiah. If indeed you have heard him and were taught by him as truth, Torah, light is in Yeshua. That you put off with regard to the former way of life, the old man being corrupted according to the desires of deceit, be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and you put on the renewed man with which was created according to Elohim in righteousness and set apartness of truth. We have to maintain the truth in love if we're going to get there, if we're going to make this. Let's go to, let's see, 2 Timothy 4, verses 3 and 4. I'll just read it to you. For there shall be a time when they shall not bear sound teaching, but according to their own desires they shall heap up for themselves teachers tickling the ear. And they shall indeed turn their ears away from the Torah, the truth, from Yeshua, and be turned aside to myths. Jesus is a myth. Yeshua is the truth. See, and people say to me, Jesus, Yeshua, so it's English, it's Greek. No, it's not about saying the name right. This is not a semantic problem. Now, clearly, when Miriam called her son, she didn't go, Jesus! Wasn't happening. Okay? It wasn't but 100 and something years earlier that the Greeks had just, done all the things they had done to the Jews. We have the whole thing going on now with Hanukkah coming up, right? Well, we know the story. That was in their recent past. Okay? You weren't giving your son a Greek name if you were a believing and observant Jew. Okay? And on top of that, with Levites in the family and everything else, you were not calling him Jesus. Let's continue. In 2 Corinthians chapter 11, I'm going to read these to you real quick from verse 13 to 15. For such are false emissaries, masquerading as emissaries of Messiah. Actually, let's go there because this is where we talk about the angel of light. 2 Corinthians 11. 2 Corinthians 11. And in verse 13. Now remember what I've already told you and listen to these verses. For such are false emissaries, deceptive workers, masquerading as emissaries of Messiah. And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as a messenger of light. What does that mean? If Hasatan showed up right now, you would think it was the Father. That's how impressive he would look. We want to picture the evil, dark, ugly, fire and brimstone, red devil. No, he would appear as an angel of light. He masquerades as a messenger of light. It is not surprising then if his servants also masquerade as servants of righteousness. So they masquerade as if they're righteous when they're not, whose end shall be according to their works. See, even Paul's talking about works again. Okay, there he is talking about works again. So this is what I was saying. This should be no surprise then as I'm explaining this to you. He's got to look like the real thing. The Mahdi is not going to look like the real thing. Okay? That's why I use the black, the salt and pepper, not because he's black or anything, but because that just gives a distinction that the ones coming look like the angel of light. I want white for light. Okay, so here's your Messiah going and replacing this false one, but he's really false too. But if he doesn't do, see, it's sort of that double take. Anybody used to watch years ago stuff like Mission Impossible? There was always that double twist. People are missing the double twist. Nobody's going to believe the Mashiach is the Mashiach if he doesn't at least come and beat up a false one, so to speak. That's what we're expecting, to be saved and delivered from the false one. But yet, the false one has to do that too, or else we're not going to believe he's the Messiah. Then the real one comes, represented by water, right? That's why the water bottle works for that. Okay? So now you know something you do at dinner with some people. All right? Let me explain to you what the rabbi was teaching. Give me a salt shaker, pepper shaker, and a bottle of water. Okay. And it was funny, I was teaching this at Sukkot, and some of the people from Canada were there, and when I got started with this, they saw me looking around, and one of them quickly ran and got me the water bottle and the salt shaker and the pepper shaker. Because that's sort of, and I never did it that way before that first time up in Canada, but it sort of really helps. It's a very good, easy picture. Okay? Okay. Yeshua is the light of the world, not Hasatan. Okay, we talked about that, the synonymousness of this. We're going to wrap this up with a couple of quick verses. Let's go to chapter 4 of John. We're going to just read a couple of things in John real quick, and then we'll be done. John chapter 4. This should make you go home and say, that is scary. Okay? This is something, by the way, you want something that might wake up a Christian? Give them this teaching. If they can receive this, they can receive anything. Okay? But they may start to burn crosses on your lawn, you do this. Okay? Okay, John chapter 4 and in verse 23. But the hour is coming, and now is when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father also does seek such to worship him. So we're going to worship him in spirit and in truth. I'll have to explain that in a minute. Elohim is spirit, and those who worship him need to worship in spirit and truth. So he said Elohim is spirit. So in other words, we are to worship him in the way Elohim wants to be worshipped. And truth, what is truth? Yeshua, the Torah, etc. He says, so that's in verse 24. So spirit and truth. Let me just get into that very quickly. That's my little quick rabbi trail. Spirit and truth. Spirit is not this ooey gooey, evangelical, Pentecostal thing. Truth is Torah, basic. Do not, eat these certain foods. Keep the Sabbath. Okay? Don't murder. Okay, we'll do it. Don't murder. Don't murder is truth. You know what spirit is? Yeshua said if you had the anger in your heart, then you had broken it. So I want you to change that from spirit and truth to advanced and basic. Let's take all of that ooey gooey Christianese out of there and make it much more simple. Okay, let's turn it into other dimensional spirit whatever things. He's simply saying the spirit of the law, the intent, and the actual law. The basic and the advanced. When Yeshua said, don't commit adultery, you've heard that law, that's truth. He said, I'm going to tell you, if you lusted after her, even though you didn't do it, you still broke it, that's the spirit of it. So it's not complicated. Advanced and basic. Okay, we'll put that in a teaching at some point too. Okay? Spirit and truth. It's not so complicated. Because people say, well, what's the spirit? We have to ease into the spirit. No, that's Christianese nonsense. It's basic and advanced. It's not complicated. Let's go to John 8:31. We got two more in John and then we're done. John 8:31. Okay? In John 8:31. So Yeshua said to those Yehudim who believed, there were Jews who believed. Look at that. He said to those Yehudim who believed him, if you stay in my word, in the truth, in the Torah, you are truly my taught ones. And you shall know the truth. You can have a relationship with the truth, and the truth, the Torah, Yeshua, shall make you free. If you have a relationship with the truth, with the Torah, with the word, with Yeshua, with the light, that will make you free. But there's the if part in verse 31. If you stay in my word, you got to stay in the truth. You got to stay in the Torah. Because Christians love to talk about, the truth will make you free. Yeah, but you don't know what the truth is that makes you free. You don't have a relationship with the truth. See, Jesus is not the truth. Yeshua is the truth. Jesus can't make you free. He can entrap you and set you into the pits of hell, basically. Yeshua sets you free. Against the law is the law. Okay, for those listening, I just lifted up the false one as being, the false Messiah as being against the law, and the bottle of water, Yeshua being the law. He is the law. He is the Torah. So it says, so you're going to have a relationship with the Torah, with the truth, with the living word, with Yeshua, and that relationship will set you free. Because sin is bondage. He's setting you free from bondage to sin. The law isn't the bondage. The law is what sets you free from the bondage. Sets you free from being a slave to sin. Paul talks about this all the time. It's the sin that's the bondage, not the law. The law is what sets you free. Let's go to John 18 and verse 37, and this will be the last verse. John 18 and verse 37. Then Pilate said to him, "You are a sovereign then?" to Yeshua. And Yeshua answered and said, "You say it because I am a sovereign. For this I was born, and for this I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. I bear witness to the law, to the Torah, to myself, to the Spirit of truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." And that's my prayer here as I do this teaching. If you are of the truth, you will hear this message. You will hear this message. I've been teaching this message for 15 years. In 15 years, I haven't heard anybody else teach this message. I'm not bragging. I wish everybody would teach this message. But could you imagine? When my wife first asked me what I was going to teach that week, almost 15 years ago, and I said, "I'm going to tell everybody Jesus is the Antichrist," she said, "No, you can't do that. We won't have anybody left in the congregation." I said, "I don't have a choice. I don't pick what I teach. I open my mouth and get out of the way. That's all." And so I said to her, "Well, then there will be nobody in the congregation. I'll go get a job." I wasn't doing this for any reason except the fact that he wouldn't let me do anything else. That's why I do this. He won't let me do anything else. And so we are here. And so, you know what? It was one of the most well received. The average teaching on our YouTube channel gets about 300-400 views. My posting of this teaching is almost 7,000. And that's just the audio on YouTube. I don't know why people listen to audio on YouTube, but people like YouTube. Somebody else asked me before I ever had a YouTube channel if they could post this on YouTube. That view one has over 10,000 views. It resonates with some people. Hopefully it will resonate enough so that they will not fall for the setup. Because this is a setup. Let's think about now the end time events. Okay, we get this Mahdi or whoever it's going to be. It may not even be the Mahdi. Whatever it is, it's going to be some false somebody. Jesus comes, takes care of that problem. Even the elect, some of them are going to be deceived. Yeshua then is planning to come soon after that. There's a period of time. That's why I say when Jesus gets here, we're going to be... People ask me all the time, "Well, how do you know we're not going to go with this blood moon thing?" I say, "Well, Jesus has to get here first. And then there's a period of time, and then Yeshua is going to show up." That's my naming of something. So if that doesn't happen, fine, write me off. But at that point, it's not going to matter. I'll probably be written off at that point anyway. Well, who knows what's going to happen through the tribulation and everything. We're not getting raptured out of here. Okay? So, now, there's an interesting thing in Zechariah 14. In Zechariah 14, see, I told you that was the last verse, but I just got inspired to take you somewhere else. In Zechariah 14, there's an interesting thing. It says, "The armies of the world were gathered against Jerusalem." You know what I'm talking about? Why would the armies of the world be gathered around Jerusalem? Because Christians in general are not detail focused. What do I mean by that? Because the Jesus guy is going to convince everybody that the false one is about to land in Jerusalem. So all the armies of the world are going to follow the Jesus guy to Jerusalem to handle the false one who's about to show up. Because they know at the end of the millennium, Hasatan gets released for a time. 1,000 years, a few years, whatever. Nobody reads their Bible anyway. Or if they do, they don't really pay attention. So I believe he's going to gather the armies of the world against Jerusalem. Verse 3, it says, "And Yahweh shall go forth and he shall fight against the Gentiles as he fights in the day of battle." Okay, excuse me. Verse 2 says, "And I shall gather all the Gentiles to battle against Jerusalem, and the city shall be shaken." This is when in verse 1 it says, "The day shall come for Yahweh." This is the day of Yahweh. And then we know it says, "In that day his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives," verse 4, "which faces Jerusalem, and it shall split in two." And that's when you get to hear several billion people go, "Oops," because they got the wrong guy. They took the wrong side. Now, when we read in Thessalonians that we're going to meet him in the air, or Corinthians that we're going to meet him in the air, right? And then we're going to be forever with him. Nobody ever asked the question where he's going. Where is he going? The Mount of Olives. Okay? It doesn't say he's coming 3 times. When he comes, he's going to this battle. We get to go to the battle, thankfully, after we get changed in the twinkling of an eye. And it says forever we'll be with him, well, wherever he goes. Not over up there, just wherever he's going. He's going here. Don't we all understand that that's where he's going? When he shows up, he's going to that battle to handle this guy and end the problem. The Messiah is going to deal with the anti-Messiah. and all the nations of the armies. And I'm glad that when we go, this is the war where it's going to like blood up to the bridle. Bodies piled up. You want to go as incorruptible, not corruptible. You don't want to be in the flesh at that battle.
Amen.
So we know that's where he's going, and the mount will split in two. By the way, every Christian quotes this verses, and other people do about this, and in here it never says Yeshua, it says Yahweh is going to land on the Mount of Olives. Well, because that is the Son we're talking about. Because it's always been the Son. The Father's never been here since chapter 1 of Genesis. You see how that plays out? It has to be the Son. Father doesn't show up until Revelation 21. This is way before that. This is before the millennium starts. It starts right after this, actually. Zechariah 14. Is this making sense? Yes. Is this making sense? I really pray that you can understand and accept what we just laid out there. I know it's hard. Prayerfully consider it. Go look up all the verses. Go study. See if the setup is really a setup. And so let's go ahead and pray, because we want to ask the Father's involvement in all this. Father, we want to come before you now, and we want to lift up everyone hearing this message, that they could have ears to hear and eyes to see, and that you would show them if this is the truth, so that they may be found standing, having done all to stand, and not be deceived by the great deception that's coming, not to be a part of the great falling away that's coming. Father, we know this false one is coming. We know the signs and wonders will be impressive. We know in Deuteronomy 13 that that's ultimately what you're talking about. The one who does the signs and wonders and they come true to lead away from your commandments, to lead you away. Because you have said that that is a test to see whether or not we will keep the commandments or not. So we know that there has to be an anti-commandment function of that prophet in Deuteronomy 13. Father, we know it's not about semantics. It's not about this name or that name and the pronouncing it. It's about understanding that this particular name is being used as a deception, as a setup for the greatest deception of all time. So great and creator, great almighty, great and wonderful King of the universe, strengthen us. Be with us to be able to receive and prepare so that we do not end up deceived. Father, we thank you for the message. We thank you for the insight. We thank you for opening our understanding so that when these things happen, we will see and we will understand. And then we will be strong in our convictions and not fall for the deception. Father, we want to thank you in advance and praise you for the insight. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. Amen.